The weekly Cybercrime and Business podcast is brought to you by SurfWatch Labs. SurfWatch Labs delivers cyber risk intelligence solutions that help organizations understand the potential for cyber attacks, determine the impact to their business, and proactively address threats head-on. Hey everybody out there, today is May 1st, 2015. I am Jeff Peters, HackSurfer editor. I'm here with Matt Leifus, HackSurfer writer, and Eric Severson, SurfWatch Labs data analyst. A little bit later, after the latest news and discussion, we have an interview with Adam Meyer. He's the chief security strategist at SurfWatch Labs. And, we talk about SurfWatch Labs data on this podcast every week. And there's just been a lot of discussion following RSA about sort of threat intelligence and a lot of people saying it's sort of the up-and-coming emerging market sort of in the cybersecurity field. So we thought we'd invite him on to sort of talk about threat intelligence and get his thoughts on that. But yeah, I guess kick it off, throw it over to you, Matt, and we can see what the top headlines of the week are.
Coming in at number 3 this week, we have Seton Healthcare Family. This hospital group was breached in February. Last Friday, they sent out letters to victims about the breach. It's estimated that about 39,000 patients had their information compromised in the attack, and hackers were able to gain access through successful phishing emails that targeted employees. So I think we might actually discuss that a little bit later. A lot of phishing attacks this week. Coming in number 2, we have SendGrid. After the company initially disclosed that one of their Bitcoin-related customer accounts had been compromised, which led to Bitcoin-based phishing attacks, the company revealed this week that one of their employee accounts had also been compromised. Cybercriminals were able to access this account on 3 separate occasions in February and March of this year. And coming in at number 1, we have Elon Musk. What do you guys think about Elon Musk?
I love Elon Musk. Take us to Mars.
Yeah, me too. It's not, yeah.
Coming Electric cars and rocket.
Yeah, right. Coming in at number 1, we have Elon Musk. Musk is the CEO of Tesla Motors. Tesla Motors was attacked this week. Their website and Twitter accounts were hijacked by a group of cybercriminals calling themselves #RipPRGang. Musk's Twitter account was also compromised. The hackers were tweeting out on the pages ways that people could get free Tesla cars. So they were fixed right away. I don't think anyone actually got a free car out of the deal, but a little bit annoying. So those are the top 3 new trending targets this week.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that stood out to me this week was there's a lot of articles in the energy sector. General Keith Alexander was speaking at a private dinner, sort of, I guess, trumpeting the warning horn about Western energy companies, once again. He listed his top 5, cyber threat actors, put Iran in there, which I thought was pretty interesting because we've seen a little bit of talk, I guess, really the past year about sort of Iran sort of being the next sort of up-and-coming country in terms of cyber warfare. So it was kind of nice to see, or I guess not nice, but interesting to see his thoughts as putting them as one of those top actors. Over at IT Portal, Stuart Poole Robb, he wrote that there's just growing fears on both sides of the Atlantic that terrorist groups or hostile governments might be behind the repeated attempts to hack into power grids, ICS, and SCADA systems. And then that kind of goes off a USA Today report from, I believe it was about a month ago, when they said that between 2011 and 2014, electric utilities reported 362 physical and cyber attacks that caused outages or other power disturbances. But of those 362, only 14 of them were actually cyber attacks. The rest were all physical in nature. And there's been some other reports that came out recently about the energy sector as well. So just kind of interesting because we don't really see a lot of news specifically regarding the energy sector. So I thought that was interesting that everyone's sort of been talking about it this week.
It's a good thing we don't see a lot of news on the energy sector, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always some kind of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt going around about the energy sector and the cyber Pearl Harbor and the end of the world that will result. And for the most part, I don't think it's that serious or that credible a threat. No one seems to be very interested in doing it so far. Because if I remember correctly, a while ago there was a report that Russians had infiltrated a big section of the American energy grid and just sort of watched. They could have done something, but they didn't. So intent is really the big question here.
Well, I think a lot of, whoever would be behind the attack, you gotta kind of weigh risk reward. If some state-sponsored hacker decides that they want to attack our energy sector, what would be the fallout from that? Would we immediately hit them back tenfold, or I think it would be kind of too much to risk. If one of those targets were to be hit, I don't know what our response would be. Obviously, I'm not a member of government or armed forces, but I would imagine there would be a significant retaliation for an attack like that.
Yeah, it's one of those unprecedented things at the moment. We don't really know what kind of cyber attack might be serious enough to merit a kinetic response, or if someone takes down the stock market, if someone takes out a hospital, takes down the power grid, at what point does that move from a pesky cyber attack to an act of war? And that's a question we'll have to find out, I think, over the next decade.
So that was, I guess, something that really stood out to me this week, just seeing a lot of energy articles out there. Another thing I thought was pretty interesting was this Twitter story. Either one of you guys sort of followed this Twitter story where their stock really dropped off significantly?
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting one because it wasn't a hack. You could even say it wasn't necessarily a leak, but it was just sort of wrong place, wrong time. Someone put Twitter's financial earnings report for the quarter on a public server, even though they hadn't, linked to it, hadn't been indexed yet. But this financial company, they're called Celerity, regularly, checks these servers and scrapes them for any financial data. So this was technically public, but no one else had seen it. So they published that Twitter had experienced a fairly significant, revenue shortfall this quarter, and then their stock just crashed about 18% immediately. So a few fast traders probably could have shorted it and done really well for themselves. It was just not controlling your server and not controlling the release of your own financial data that really sent them into sort of a tailspin for a few days.
Yeah, and I think it was beginning of this year we were talking about the Finfor Group that was targeting a lot of different enterprises, and that kind of made me think of this. I mean, even though that was more of a direct, cybercrime, and this was more of an accident, that just seemed like the kind of information that they would want to steal, because they were, I believe, targeting about 100 different organizations and trying to steal mergers and acquisitions info and kind of other pending documents. So I think there's definitely, obviously, a market out there for people who want to steal this stuff. So if you put it out there publicly, someone's definitely going to find it.
Yeah, this is sort of the legal business version of that attack. From what I can tell, their bot just publishes things immediately to their Twitter feed. So maybe nobody even knew that it was coming before it happened. Also, I just found it kind of funny that Twitter's own stock was really screwed over by a bot using Twitter.
Yeah, pretty ironic.
Watch out.
I guess kind of going into the theme of that, there was a few other attacks. Last week, I think we talked about the HSBC mortgage breach. There's also one at Auburn University. Kind of both situations where they said they inadvertently, exposed or inadvertently made public information that they shouldn't. So yeah, it's just, even though this Twitter one wasn't really a direct breach caused by cybercrime, it definitely seems like kind of a common trend we've seen, several instances just the past couple weeks. Yeah, so those were two of the most interesting stories this week. Is there anything else that stood out to you guys?
The theme this week seemed to involve phishing attacks. There were, as I mentioned, the number 3 new top trending target this week was that Seton Family Healthcare, and that was via phishing attacks. There were other healthcare sector targets as well that have accounted for a total of over 50,000 people having their personal information compromised. So we had the Seton Family Healthcare, we had this attack at St. Agnes where 25,000 people had their information compromised, and then there was another smaller one at St. Vincent Medical. 700 people were affected there. But several targets showing up this week via phishing just in the healthcare sector. I'm sure that there were other ones as well.
Yeah, another thing, we had Proofpoint on last week, and right after we had them on, they released some new research about this new phishing attack using Career Builder.
Yeah, it's this fairly simple but pretty brilliant attack where these people are creating malicious Word documents contain malware droppers and then sending them through Career Builder to HR representatives, whose job ostensibly is to open attachments from random strangers all day. So they're opening these malware-ridden resumes that then infect their computers and start stealing information or give a foothold from an attacker to get into their system. So it's pretty simple, but it seems quite effective.
Yeah, and one of the things I read in that post was that resumes, too, you kind of pass around to, sometimes several different people. So if you get an infected resume, you might pass it along and infect, 3 or 4 or 5 different computers. I guess sticking with the theme of phishing, there was a story came out probably a week or two ago about how the Sony breach happened. So in case you missed that, Stuart McClure, he's the CEO of computer security firm Cylance. WikiLeaks published all those Sony emails to a public database. So he analyzed them all, and he concluded that the North Korean hackers likely used fake Apple ID emails sent to IT administrators at the Sony Pictures Entertainment Company and used those to steal passwords and logins, and then ultimately use those to gain control of the company's computer network. So, we've been talking a lot about phishing, even when you look at these huge breaches like Sony, which is probably the biggest profile breach really of the last year, that can be traced back to, phishing emails as well.
Yeah, it's something ridiculous, like 92% of major cyber attacks somehow involve spear phishing. It's one of the most common ways for someone to get in, steal information, install malware. At this point, it's all going back to phishing, so keep an eye out.
All right, well, that's it for this week's discussion. Coming up, we have an interview with SurfWatch Labs' Adam Meyer, where we talk about threat intelligence and cyber risk intelligence and sort of the future of that and where it's headed. The first question I had for you is I've read a little bit recently just that threat intelligence is sort of the next big thing in the cybersecurity space, and a few different articles from RSA kind of talking about that. So I was just wondering if you could give us maybe a high-level overview of what's the difference between threat intelligence versus cyber risk intelligence and how they differ.
Yeah, sure. Especially coming from RSA myself, there's threat intelligence that was definitely the buzz terms at RSA. I walked by 10 or 15 different booths, all advertising that they did some type of threat intelligence type of service or offer some type of threat intelligence product. A lot of different terms being thrown around, and a lot of different vendors were presenting that you wouldn't suspect were actually threat intelligence providers. And what that does is that tells us that the market is maturing and is trying to normalize itself. I can tell you that there's a lot of different types of, quote, intelligence, unquote, out there. Some are very low-level intelligence feeds where you're really just looking at a new signature base that's getting pumped into your security operations center for your incident responders to consume. Others are more strategic, like the SurfWatch, where we're looking to provide information for the executive level, the decision makers of the organization. So you really have to look at the difference between the high-level strategic type of information versus the low-level, what I would call tactical or operations-based threat intelligence information that's more technologist-based. So you'll see a lot of that, and you'll see a lot of change out there when it comes to intelligence as the community tries to educate itself and kind of set some best practices and some standards. I could also point out that last week at RSA as well, Forrester came out with a threat intelligence maturity model where SurfWatch was placed in the strategic category. And I noticed in that maturity model there are 6 or 7 different classifications for threat intelligence type of providers. So when you're looking at it, make sure you're looking at it from what do you need as an organization? And you're probably going to find that there's multiple providers that will meet your needs. You just need to point out that, there's different providers who are hitting different decision-making roles in your organization, whether it's a low-level technologist in the security operations center or a high-level executive decision-maker. Now, where cyber risk intelligence comes in is you're hitting more of that business intelligence type of angle within threat intelligence. So instead of affecting the security operations center or targeting those users specifically, cyber risk intelligence, again, is taking that analytical threat intelligence data and putting it into a business intelligence context. So that way the business can see what risks the cyber environment is bringing to their customers and suppliers, their brand and reputation, their financials, as well as their IT infrastructure, and you can use it to utilize the cyber risk intelligence as a risk pillar, if you will, for your overall enterprise risk management program.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because obviously it's a big focus and a lot of organizations are talking about using this threat intelligence. So, once you make that decision that you want to do so, how do you go ahead and start implementing it and actually using it?
Well, you need to do some self-reflection within your organization. One of the first steps that I usually challenge people, especially those listening to this podcast, is the very first thing you should think about is what is your current intelligence capability? If you have feeds or from external providers, or if you're just collecting information locally, who is consuming that information to make decisions? That should be your start point. If you're only consumers of information or incident responders or security engineers or individuals of that type who operate, the security operations center type of tools, you're probably not doing yourself full justice. That means the information that's important is not getting that business context wrapped around it, and the decision makers outside of the security operations center are not able to make business risk decisions based off of that threat intelligence. So if your information is not being consumed, what I say, all the way up and all the way down, that means not just your security operations center, it's your CIO, your CISO, your risk executives, your business unit leaders. We got to keep in mind that security is a supporting function of the organizational mission, right? So each business unit has mission goals, and whether you're in sales or human resources or product or logistics or engineering, your organization likely has multiple business units, and each one of those business units has goals for the year, and IT and security have to be supporting those types of roles. So it's important to pay attention to who is consuming threat intelligence within your organization, and how are they utilizing the threat intelligence products that you're giving them to make decisions based on risk. If you're not able to do that, that's the first step is why are we not able to provide intelligence products to the business unit leadership? Likely because you don't have some metrics or data collection capability, and if you do, it's low level stuff. So obviously you're not going to put a bunch of blacklisted IP and blacklist domains and this malware signature and that malware signature. You're not going to give that to a business unit executive. That's a sheer sign right there that your threat intelligence capabilities is staying in one group and it's not being leveraged by the business as a whole. Certainly has value, right, if you're responding to incidents and things of that nature, but you really are missing the boat where the leadership team who is making the decisions, who controls the budget, who you usually have to defend and say, what value are they getting for their security posture, you're not able to translate the threats out there into a business resiliency risk, right? So what are threats to the business and what people, process, and technology do they need to bring to bear to reduce risk to the business? Well, if your threat program is not providing what we term evaluated intelligence, right, taking data from multiple sources, distilling it down into threat profiles, and then putting an evaluated intelligence product in front of decision makers, you're going to run into some problems. Another issue is people aren't collecting their own information. They're simply saying, I need threat intelligence, so let me just go throw some money at a vendor and I get all this deluge of information without really collecting what's going on in their own network. Another rule of thumb I use is, do you know what normal looks like in your environment? If you don't know what normal looks like in your environment, you should start there. You should be collecting your own information off of data you already likely have. Obviously, a lot of organizations have a lot of sensor network and host-based sensors out there. You're watching your boundary. You're watching what users are doing. Understand what's going on locally first, keeping it simple. You want to just collect information, keep it very, very simple, keep it relevant to what's going on to the business before you go out there and provide, spend more dollars on external threat providers. And another thing that's important to do, which is very, very critical, is to just be diligent and to have patience. Look at what you're collecting, why you're collecting it, and what value does that information have. Again, it has value to multiple roles within the organization, and so do that due diligence, have that patience to collect information and start packaging it into evaluated intelligence products that the business unit can understand.
One of the things that a lot of people talk about is sort of the disconnect between, the executives and the tech side of a business. And you're talking a little bit about that sort of, making sure you have the data that you can present to, the C-suite or the board of directors. So just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the challenges involved in sort of translating that tech to non-tech speak.
Right. So it's really, and that's what our flagship product C-suite really excels at, is we're looking to simplify the data. Again, you look at data best practices, data that does not have any context is not really information. And information that doesn't affect the decision maker doesn't mean, it kind of means that information is not necessarily valuable, right? So it's kind of one of the things, you can't just throw data at an individual if you don't have the context and the relevancy to the consumer. Then it's not a very value-added type of drill. So a lot of times I recommend people look at, again, threats from a business resiliency standpoint, right? What threats to your customers and suppliers are present? What threats to your brand and reputation are present? What threats to your financials, right? What can cause harm to the business from a financial standpoint? And then what threats can cause harm to your IT infrastructure, to your technologies? And use that kind of context to educate your business unit leaders. Have a conversation with your business unit leaders, understand what their goals are for the year, right? So if you're in a sales business unit, if you talk to that individual and they're looking to expand sales to maybe overseas, or they're looking to break into a new market, what technology-based challenges from a cyber risk standpoint does that goal bring to bear? Do you have new remote workers you need to worry about? Are you working in if you go overseas, do you have a new regulatory environment you have to play around in? Do you have now a confidentiality type of issues? Because now, you've got to put maybe more encryption type technologies in place for their deployed and remote workers can get back into your internal corporate applications. Do you need to outsource things to different cloud providers? Look at the business unit mission goals, right? What's their goals for the year? Translate those into technological risks that can stop them from achieving those goals, then you need to look at your threat intelligence information, say, okay, what threats, whether they're physical threats or natural threats or cyber-related threats, can cause harm to that business unit being successful in achieving their goals. And so that's where you really got to look at threat intelligence for that executive level consumer. You can't just throw them at, hey, you need, this many pieces of malware were discovered, or this many types of probes we came through, or hey, we blocked this much spam. The business unit executive does not care about those types of things. The CISO may care about them from internal, security team performance, or our appliances and our engineers, at optimum, and are we defending as best we can. But the business unit executive could care less about that. So you're going to have to translate that into their language, right? If you're helping them achieve their goals and you're using threat intelligence as one of those risk assessment aspects, say, hey, if ransomware is kicking up, if threat intelligence telling you that ransomware is kicking up in a specific industry, in a specific line of business, and you don't have a lot of countermeasures to that ransomware, right there, that's a business unit risk that you would want to educate the leadership on, because you may need funding or people, process, technology to reduce that risk. Or the business executives may say, I hear you, but it's an acceptable level of risk. It's not worth it. That's acceptable as well, right? You're keeping them well informed with the proper context that they can make that risk management decision on. Do they need to apply additional security resources, reallocate resources, or do nothing and accept the risk? But at least the executives are well informed to do their accountability decisions, right? Because they're accountable to the organization and to the customers and to the shareholder. I think that's where a lot of problems are. It's a corporate culture problem. It's the CIOs, CISOs, and the lower level security personnel not able to translate intelligence and technical information to the business unit executive for consumption, and making sure that we have to do a better job, to be honest, about making sure that conversation happens.
Yeah, so is that the primary goal then of SurfWatch Labs going forward? I guess keeping executives and business leaders informed of the cyber risk that's out there?
Exactly. A lot of our statements we make and is we're trying to, or we are connecting the server room to the boardroom, right? So instead of staying strictly into that low-level server room-based technology information, we're bubbling that threat information up to a different type of language, to a different type of consumer, to educate the business unit leadership on what risks they face across their industries and across their business type of processes, right? So previously I said, you have your low-level tactical type of things that are going into the SOC versus your strategic and high-level information. SurfWatch is concentrating on that executive level, strategic, high-level threat intelligence that's easily able to be understood by non-technical individuals, which is critical. So we focus on that type of aspect. We also like to say we complement a lot of other providers. There's certainly plenty of other vendors that are doing the low-level threat intelligence, security operations center level type of support, which is perfectly fine and perfectly value-added. But how do you get it out of the security operations center? How do you get it into the hands of the business unit executive so that they are well informed, that they can make risk management decisions, or apply more budget, which is always usually needed, apply more budget to the right areas, not just throw money at unevaluated type of risk areas. They can actually assign resources strategically to the proper area.
Yeah, that's all the questions I have. Unless there's anything else you think people should know about SurfWatch Labs or threat intelligence?
Yeah, just kind of a final thought is to make sure to anybody listening to this, who is consuming your threat intelligence information. If it's only the low-level technical information typically consumed by a security operations center, and it doesn't leave that team very much, you have a problem right there. Your alignment from security to the business unit executive might be broken. And so you'll want to say, hey, what information does the CISO want to see, what information does the CIO want to see, and what information do the business unit leaders want to see, and how can I use threat intelligence to deliver that news, to deliver that assessment. You really should be looking at that, and if you have a problem with that, that's exactly where SurfWatch fits in. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll help you out. We'll give you information about what other Fortune 500 companies are doing, how we can support your needs in that area, and then go from there.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time, Adam. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
That's it for this week's Cybercrime and Business podcast. As always, you can follow us on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever else you listen. And for more information, check out SurfWatchLabs.com.